the most amazing thing to watch is once I gave her that information, she never stopped inviting him to play. And when that would happen where he would start to get mean, she would say, I'm not going to play with you if you treat me this way. And her teachers would tell me this. She would set a firm boundary, or I'm not going to be friends with someone who's mean like this. And when he would stop, she never held him back from being a part of the group. And that, to me, is all I could ask for from her.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast for conscious, cycle-breaking parents ready to turn toddler tantrums into teachable moments. Hi, I'm Cara Tyrrell, a lifetime lover of littles, mom to 2 grown and flown girls, and an early childhood educator. Through the show, I teach you my collaborative parenting methodology for nurturing your little human's mind, body, and spirit. Because how you connect and collaborate in the first 5 years is how you raise happy, healthy kids who grow into the best version of themselves and find true success in school and life. I am so excited to welcome back Kyira Wackett to the show today. She joined us almost exactly a year ago and laid down an episode about mom shame and blame and the vulnerability that goes along with parenting through the lens of a therapist. She is a licensed mental health counselor. She also at the time was a toddler parent, kind of in those early toddler years, and now her kiddo is just about to be 5. And so she's back, and she's back to share with us a very challenging experience that happened in the social, emotional, interpersonal world of preschool, and how, as a mom who knows what she wants when she talks about creating space for her child and being moral driven and value driven and boundary setting and having tolerance and forgiveness, how hard it was for her in that moment to have it. And so this is a really powerful episode about what we know versus what we do, and how to hold space for ourselves and everyone around us when the wheels fall off the bus. Kyira, welcome back to the show. It has been almost a full year since you first came on and talked about mom shame and blame and guilt and gave us some real concrete strategies and awarenesses. And since then, you've had some really interesting experiences in your own parenting journey. So you're back.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so excited to be able to celebrate how far this podcast has continued to reach and impact people in the community that it's built. And so I'm grateful to be a part of that as a listener and as a guest. So thank you for having me back.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this has just taken on a life of its own and become a really special place to talk about hard things. So one of the things that I've always believed, and it's the core of this show, is that parenting is a personal development journey. So when you and I last talked, you had an almost 3-year-old. And so tell us about your little one and how she's doing and how old she is now.
Yeah. So she just turned 5 and she is, I feel like everyone makes that joke of like 5 going on 15, going on whatever. And I think what I'm coming to realize is that what often people mean by that is there's a transition point where your kid is becoming their own a bit more. And so it's easy to dismiss it as like, they have attitude, they're doing this, just wait until they're teenagers. But the reframe I've really made in my head is how amazing that I have this person that is constantly redefining independence and authenticity for herself. And sometimes she does it in ways that definitely come off snotty and mean and have an attitude about them. She's 5. She doesn't know any better. Sometimes she does it in ways that is really empowering and this like magical exploration. And so I've been really open to learning all aspects of self. We just did the kindergarten enrollment. And so you can appreciate this from an educator side and as a mom side. I'm in that like transition of honestly, my biggest grieving is now she has to go to school 5 days a week. So I don't get to go take her places when it's not packed in the middle of the week anymore. Like now I have to go to the zoo with everybody else on the weekend when there's a million people. But it's just interesting to think about that and to be thinking about, it just seems like there are so many with each stage. I'm trying to decide how much of it actually is a lot and how much of it is us making things feel bigger and scarier and overwhelming and fearing all of the complications. And now it's like, but you have to make the right decision and do this. And I think sometimes we've sort of compounded the stress of transition as parents because we feel like we have to make sure it's perfect and right. And so, but yeah, she also on Friday just got her orange belt in Taekwondo. So she went from a white to a yellow to an orange in 3 months, and she's excelling and loving it. And it is the coolest thing to also start to watch your kid find something that's theirs. Like, I never did that. I never pushed her towards this. We just are really approaching, try what sounds cool to you, and to see her taking something and to take it serious. And how fun is that to watch someone be so committed and also still come back and giggle and play and be a 5-year-old. It's really cool.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. What an update. I love it. So, what you're describing is really fascinating because one of the things we talk about around here are the 5 executive functioning skills that kids need in order to be successful when they do the big leap to kindergarten.
Yes.
And the reason kindergarten really is that spot is because of that level of independence that you're talking about, that they have to be able to reflect on what am I feeling right now. They have to be able to decide, can I wait 10 seconds before the words come out of my mouth so I can process what I'm feeling right now?
Yes.
All these things. And I know that when she was still in preschool, you had a situation where it wasn't that you and Everly were trying to co-regulate in that moment, although I bet you do a lot of that. It was that she had an experience at school with other people that you did not feel is that necessarily the way that you would have handled it, or that she had to figure out how to handle this on her own. Are you willing to share that with us? Because this is where I think a lot of parents are like, okay, I'm working really hard in my conscious state to meet my child where they are. Okay, I am working really hard inside our household unit. And as a team, we're collaborating decently throughout our time together. But it's when they fly that we need to be able to trust that they can do it out there too. And that if it is a challenging moment, it's still a learning moment.
Well, it's interesting because I remember talking about some of these things before. And I think because that my mindset and my awareness has been so key around that, there's actually been some things that have shifted that I think articulate it even more in the last year where I've had to trust it. And so a big thing that happened in her transition, she moved to a preschool that is I don't know what the actual technical term is, but they don't kick anybody out. So a lot of preschools, you can kick students out. They can be asked to leave. Families can be taken off enrollment. And when we moved to this house, so I think this was just after you and I recorded, she started at this new preschool where every kid is welcome. And what that means is often there's a lot of kids that are at this school that have been kicked out by one or more preschools, which I think there's such a tragedy in thinking that there are 3 and 4-year-olds that have already been given this bias about themselves that they are so broken and problematic. And how does that make the parents feel? What do we do with that? And so when she made this transition over, she was with a lot of new kids. Obviously, it was a new space. Everly is somebody that I think struggles in different ways. She's never, I think probably because we talk so much about emotions and so much about emotion regulation, that is something that she tends to be a bit more skilled than some of the other kids that she's around. And so then she was in classrooms where there were kids where the way they dealt with their emotions was hitting other students, throwing toys at other students, doing some of these pieces. And so where we ran into a couple interesting things, there were 2 students that she's had the gift of now being in school with for almost 2 years. And so it's really cool to watch them evolve. But where I had to watch, not even watch because I wasn't there, I had to secondhand hear of and witness my daughter's suffering, these other kids suffering, the teachers suffering, and feel like I had no control and autonomy over it and helping Everly navigate it. And I think that to me was the trickiest piece. And it was this realization of times where I felt like Everly wasn't supported, where something happened. And then, there was a kid that hit her or threw something at her. She had used her words. She said, stop. They didn't listen. She then ended up using her body back, and then she was in trouble. And so I'm like, this feels hard. I do want to regulate that, or come in and support that. Also, her using her body is not okay. It's also really tricky when there are other kids that are using their body all day long and they're not having the same punishments. And so that was so hard because I'm like, how do I not also play the part that then participates in making these other kids villains and problems and quote unquote bad kids, because they're not. They're beautiful humans learning to figure it out. But then also witnessing my daughter trying to navigate that and feeling like I can only teach her what I can from the back end. And then in those moments, all she's got to go on is her brain's capacity to not react, which is not very high at 3, 4, and 5 years old. And so all of this to say, we got to a place with her through this where I had to throw out any judgment of the other student, of the teachers, and of Everly and every interaction, and just to continue to come back to this place of what can I learn? How do I honor? How do I validate? And how do I empower her to continue to make choices to keep herself safe and to navigate conflict? And one of the things that was really tricky for me was when this was happening a lot, there was a teacher that was in the classroom that basically told Everly and another student that the words they used were targeted. I think that this kid just struggled, and I think they probably just wanted to be friends with Everly and this other friend and didn't have the words. But they said, well, just don't play with them. Go play over here. Or if they would follow, like, oh, just go do this other thing. And I'm like, we're not doing that. We are not going to make ourselves smaller. Like, I do not agree with this. And so then teaching Everly what my value system was while still honoring this kid and not disrespecting the teacher. I know I'm going off on a very long explanation of all of this, and it's not the same example as what we had before, but man, has that really given me the insight to how do I hold Everly accountable? How do I hold these other kids accountable? How do I hold the teachers accountable? How do I also understand that situations are going to happen and different adults are going to respond and support in different ways? And also sometimes my kid is also going to be the one that provokes, aggravates, or is for all intents and purposes a dick. And like, how do I deal with that and not judge her? And then also not be like, well, it's only okay because this other kid did it. And that has been, I'm preparing for more of those interactions as we get older, to not always expect her to be the quote unquote bigger person, because that's not fair, but to instead respond to each interaction with what did we learn? How are we reacting? What was our body feeling and needing in this moment? And how do I also do this in a way where I'm still building trust with you and these other adult figures instead of cutting them down when I don't agree with how they're handling it? So again, I know I put us in a different route, but that feels so salient to me. Yeah.
That's good. So, first of all, I'm just blown away. So I want to, for all the listeners, here's what I need you to know right now. Kyira is a very smart person. She's a well-educated human being. She's a licensed mental health therapist. Listen to all the reasons why this shouldn't be so hard for her.
Right.
Okay. But in parenting, all bets are off. I was a teacher sending my kids to teachers. I knew too much. It was overwhelming. And this is very often how our brains function.
Yes.
And listening to you talk, I felt my cortisol rise. I felt my stress go up for that ping pong game that you're having, trying to make sure that this ends up in an equity match. And it's really, really hard. But what I also heard you say is you came back to your core values, your core morals, and that is how you led the conversations. That's how you led the modeling. Calling all of my teachers and early childhood professionals. Cara here, just popping in to say thank you. One of my favorite things about this podcast is knowing that it's not just parents who are listening, that you are part of this toddler tribe too, because you serve them on a daily basis. Did you know that I do early childhood education trainings, pre-service, in-service? And as often as I can, I float around the United States and beyond to conferences to do the work to help you do the work. I would love to connect specifically with you. So here is an opportunity to get on a one-on-one call with me, work with me. Let's get together. It's totally a free consultation. And I would love to hear who you serve, their ages, their stages, their struggles, and what type of professional development you would benefit from most. Who knows? Maybe I'll create a whole new workshop just for you, your team, and the kids that you serve. Look forward to connecting with you. And now let's get you back to this amazing episode. I was recently at a conference and I listened to someone present on UPR, unconditional positive regard. And I was just like, yes, please. Can we have more of that? And I'll have a whole episode on that for listeners to come and really dive into. But that's what you're doing. You're saying, I regard every human being in this situation as capable of being great and kind. In this moment, they didn't fulfill that goal.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean they're not capable of it. And quite honestly, if that's the message that Everly walks into kindergarten with, she'll be all right.
Yes. And the idea, I think, because you do feel that, I think everybody's like, oh, that's that mama bear instinct, or it's that whatever, like nobody better hurt my kid. Nobody better do anything. And there were some incidences where she came home and she had been tackled by a kid at school who had like his hand on her throat. And I had to stop and go, this kid is 4. What is happening in the context of this kid's life? How do I still hold him accountable? And this is the hard part, because there are days I don't want to do this. I just want to say, this kid is, mean, or this kid's a bully, or do this because that feels easier, because I don't want to have to build context around it. He hurt my kid.
Right.
And then you go, what's happening in this person's life? What are they missing? What are they needing? What hasn't been accessible to them yet? And in one of the incidences, it was a kid whose parents were going through a terrible divorce. This kid had no sense of rooting. And it wasn't that the parents weren't trying as best as they could. It's that they were drowning in their grief, in their pain, in their conflict. And this kid was doing the best that he could. He had been kicked out of multiple schools. So again, messaging to the parents, messaging to the kid, how else would you expect this kid is going to feel? And the one thing that would happen, and I noticed it, and this was important because I would do a lot of the pickups, and often in the afternoon is when things were more riled up. The kids are running out of steam, all that. And what I would notice is often this kid, and he would do it in front of parents, other parents. Sometimes he would come up to Everly right in front of me and do something that was really mean. Is the minute that he did it, he got one-on-one attention from the teachers. So then I paused and I was like, oh my gosh, this kid just needs to be held. This kid doesn't know how to play with other kids because he doesn't know how to get attention without making it a scene right now. Because right now he's got to scream loud enough to be heard over everything else. Okay. I don't have to try to make Everly understand all of that, but how do I filter that through the lens of that, and then teach her also, if he puts his hands on you, what are you allowed to do to keep yourself safe? And so then we talked about safety, but then we also talked about not reducing him to one action, the same as I would never want anyone to reduce her to one action on a day that she does something hurtful or harmful. And so we did a lot of that equating at home of like, yeah, that seems really similar to, remember that one time that this thing happened and we'll kind of like make it funny in a way. Like, she's like, yeah, mom, I lost my mind. And like, just makes a joke about it. And like, we try to make it so silly to realize like, yeah, our brain made that a 10 and it was really a 2. And so it doesn't have to be, well, you've never pushed anyone, you've never done this, you're a better kid. It's you handled that dysregulation in a different way and you can appreciate what that feels like. And the coolest thing, and I know that there's some credit that I get because I'm her mom, but a lot of this is just her being her, is the most amazing thing to watch is once I gave her that information, she never stopped inviting him to play. And when that would happen where he would start to get mean, she would say, I'm not going to play with you if you treat me this way. And her teachers would tell me this. She would set a firm boundary, or I'm not going to be friends with someone who's mean like this. And when he would stop, she never held him back from being a part of the group. And that, to me, is all I could ask for from her. Like if she misses the mark on everything, if she has got her reading stuff, her math stuff, and we've talked about this before, that hyper like attunement to all that stuff, like whatever, she will get there. But the fact that she can do that, and there are days that it's not even that I can't do it, it's that I don't want to do it because I just want to tantrum myself. Like,
yeah,
that's the gift. And I'm grateful for that. And I am grateful for the opportunity to now get to witness this specific child that I'm thinking of grow and figure out how to get love and secure connection without having to do that. And how beautiful is that when the world around him stops making him a villain and sees him as a person with needs. And if we could do that and help our kids do that, gosh, I feel like the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I just keep running around whatever stage they'll give me, whatever microphone they'll let me talk into, saying this generation is the one that has to save us.
Yes.
And this is the work that we need to do now to set them up to do it. And, you know, when you were talking, I was seeing colors pop in my head because I've been doing a lot of traveling and training and teacher professional development lately, because we keep talking about the brain, right? But breaking down the different sections of the brain for these educators and these parents so they know that which section is this child tapped into when they're having the big behavior versus which section are they tapped into when they can sit down and have conversations like Everly can with you and Jordan around a 10 versus a 2 and reflecting on behavior. So, you know, Everly's in the green. She is in that prefrontal cortex. She's tapping into what can I learn from these experiences because she has the safety connection to do it. Yeah. This other kiddo just kept popping red for me. He's all brainstem, all am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And then occasionally he'd pop into the blue, which is kind of that middle brain, right? Do I have a connection point? Am I loved? Am I loved? But this child just walked around the whole day using explosive behavior to ask those two questions. Am I safe? And am I loved? And primarily the answer was no. And then Everly said, actually, if you can stop doing these things, yes, you are. Yeah. So powerful.
Well, and I think about, you know, this is a skill that I think so many of us struggle with. And so when we think about arming these young people with it, we're like, but I don't know how to do that. And some days I don't want to do that because I feel burnt out and resentful and wronged and I haven't processed my emotions. And I think, you know, a lot of the invitation, at least for me, to parent Everly in the way that, again, connects back to my morals and values like you talked about, is also reparenting myself around those same dynamics. And I think the classic example most people can think about is how are you talking about other drivers in front of your kids in the car? How are you giving grace to somebody else who didn't put their turn signal on, who is going too slow, who did this thing? Like, how much are you reducing somebody to the story you've told yourself or the reaction you're having in that moment? And so how can you pull back from that and validate sometimes that that's just where you're at? And that's okay. It's not, we're just all terrible people and we're all judgmental and like, you know, everything's out the window. But noticing, how do I move? If we're going to use colors, like how do I get to the green?
Yeah.
How do I create more grace? Even the idea of like, gosh, you know what? I still don't have to say that how that person's driving is okay, but I don't have to be so bothered or controlled by that. Right. I don't have to make that the central point. And that's sort of the next stage that I'm working on with Everly. And I think by way of reframing it for myself is I don't really need everybody else to be okay with the boundaries that I set or the choices that I make. I have to know that I'm not trying to be hurtful or harmful in the world. And I have to understand that taking care of myself is my number one priority so that I can take care of these people around me. Mm-hmm. And as I start to think about how to model that, it gives me more tangible examples to then bring in to help model to her. And again, there's still days where I have I'm supposed to be able to do this. I'm the therapist. I'm this and then it doesn't work, or Everly is talking about Taekwondo. There was a class where she was the disruptive child in the group that everybody was following because she was just completely exhausted and not engaged. And I had to fight. I turned to Jordan. He was at the class with me and I was like, I hate this, but I'm feeling disappointed in her right now. And I don't want that to be the feeling I lead my interaction with her about. And he just kind of held my hand. He's like, it's okay to have that for a moment. Just let yourself feel it. And then we talked through it. And it was she is doing the best she can, and her having a day where she's disruptive does not define her character. How do we talk with her about it in a way that, again, helps her build curiosity and understand dominoes and consequences rather than us attack her and shame her and be again, and this is where I think compliance versus empowerment comes into play.
Yes.
How do we empower her to make those choices rather than scare her into complying or force her into compliance? And so I feel that is something for many of us. And again, just to hone in for listeners, it doesn't mean I don't still have those moments where 1, I don't want to do it. 2, things don't work and I am dysregulated and it doesn't help. Or 3, where I don't still feel those feelings that then I feel shame about that I have to walk myself through and out of so that I can lead from that place of curiosity and empowerment.
Yes, you took those words right out of my mouth because every time I hear you talk about another interaction where you're directly affected, you automatically reroute yourself to observational thinking, just seeing what it is in front of you as opposed to judging it, and then a curiosity around it. And actually, I recently heard someone talk about the aggressive driver syndrome. It's kind of funny that it's popping up here. And they were like, you know what I do? I get curious. I say to myself, I wonder, maybe their wife is in labor and they're rushing to go get to the hospital. I wonder and they create a scenario that is in all likelihood probably not real, right? But enough to distance themselves from the reactionary feeling that they were having. And then after that, they can get, real clear in their head around the fact that I get to choose the energy that now sits in my body around this or not. So I'm super curious after that Taekwondo experience.
Yeah.
Because me, language is my thing. The way we talk to kids, the way we craft the words, all that stuff. How did that conversation sound with Everly afterwards?
Well, it was really interesting because her Taekwondo instructor, they normally at the end of classes will get tapes on their belts. And so the tapes are to celebrate completing a class successfully, working as a team. And there were a couple other kids that were also, I think, struggling with attention that day as well. And then what was happening is they were all feeding off each other. And so the whole group of kids was just not super engaged in everything that was happening. And none of them got tapes that day. And so there was a lesson that was already being invited by the instructor. So that kind of gave me an in to talk about how did that feel to finish class and not get a tape? And then the thing that I really try to lead with her, so we were driving home and I said, I noticed that today the way you engaged in class seemed a bit different than it does in most of the other classes. Tell me about what was different for you. And one of the things that I can't tell, sometimes I think I expect a bit more from her because I don't know can be a perfectly reasonable example, particularly for a 5-year-old. There are times where I think that I don't know is the get out of discomfort pass for many people. And so initially it was, I don't know. And then I'll kind of gently push and nudge to be like, well, let's think through that. What did you notice was different? How did you feel? One of the things in class is being able to raise our hands and stay in attention when we're not called on. How did it feel like you were doing with that today? And just starting to ask some of these questions. The hard part is, again, how do I help her become accountable for her actions and also not be like, well, I just think that you're a bad kid. And so we were able to get there. But I do think a lot of the times in these interactions, her initial quick response is, I don't know. And then I will sort of try to mine. The reason I am saying that is sometimes I'm not sure if she is capable of having the conversation as quickly as sometimes I expect her to. And so I think there's some learning I'm still doing there that maybe if I waited a little bit longer, or maybe if I gave her the question and then said, if she said, I don't know, say, well, why don't we just think about it for a little bit? We'll talk about it after dinner. Or we'll talk about it tomorrow. There's some more capacity that she has as she gets older that we can have that conversation later on. And I don't think I always give her as much grace. But where we really landed on was, how does it feel to know that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but what we really honed in on and talked about is that Everly is a very powerful person. She has a lot of energy. Every kid does. And because she is someone that is very assertive and very communicative, she will by nature be the person that has quite a bit of influence in her friend groups. She's going to be the first one to speak up and have an opinion. And I can see how that could play out. So what we talked about and what we really got to in that conversation was how cool that we could see her power for influence. And then how did she feel about the influence she had? And how would she like that influence to look? And it has been incredible to watch how that conversation has changed. Again, it put her in a place of empowerment. So now she sees it when she goes to Taekwondo. When she sees a kid in a younger belt or a lower belt come in, she is so excited to be the model because now it's, I have influence and I want it to matter. There's going to be times it doesn't, or she's going to make a different choice, or she's not going to have the emotional capacity to choose that. But what I am also reminding myself of is those moments, those blips are very normal reactions that she's having to the world, married normal behaviors. What we do with this and like that curiosity and that empowerment puts her in the position where I kind of am trying to think about her behavior as 80-20. My goal is to help her get it right for her on her morals, her values, her choices 80% of the time, and then allow those 20% flops to exist so she gets to learn and deepen her emotional connection to why that 80% feels more like what she wants to choose.
Oh my gosh. I'm voting for Everly for president, just so you know. She got my vote. And she may rewrite Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you know what? You're right.
Oh my goodness. Yes, you are just giving me such what I needed, that bright light, that hope that these kids, and is everybody getting this? At 3, at 4, at 5, they are capable of growing into these very deep, confusing learning spaces if we believe that they are. And the other thing I really just want to anchor in is that Everly is a very communicative kiddo, and language and expression is not her hang up. A lot of kids struggle with that right now, especially we're seeing that in post-pandemic education space. The percentage of kids who have either language delays or some type of processing challenge as a result of some deprivation during that time period has completely flipped classrooms from minority to majority. That said, they're really feeling beings. So you're listening to Kyira say that she can have these high level conversations with her kid. And boy, am I excited about that. Don't feel like that needs to be your goal, right? If your child can't process conceptually or abstractly at that level yet, it's okay. Just talk about the feelings, because those they understand, because their body is in constant emotional energy shift.
Yes. Well, and I feel like the two things that all of us probably could invite more into our lives with kids, regardless of where they are at in their developmental stage and journey, is to slow down, because oftentimes I think, again, because she is more quick in her communication skills, there are times that I forget that maybe she needs more time and space. Like I said, like she might genuinely not know, and I need to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's realizing she has a friend who is much quieter than her, who spends a lot more, she explores a lot more in her head before she's willing to let anybody in on what's going on. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the teachers that Everly has, they're both, that main teacher has been doing this for like 30 years. Mm-hmm. And so there's just a lot of insight, I think, that she has to seeing all students, not just the loudest students or the most, I guess, maybe in your face, whether that's talking more or their behaviors. But she's taught the kids the importance of silence. And I think that many of us forget that too. And so sometimes it isn't even that they need to talk. It's just like coloring. What color are you feeling right now? Or just letting them do that, or sitting by them and being like, gosh, I can feel my chest feels really tight and I'm feeling really sad and angry. It would make sense if you were feeling that way too, without expecting them to have to be able to label and name it. And I feel like that piece of just our own willingness to talk about our emotions and to slow down and give them a chance to just think, even if they don't decide to share it with you, is that gift. Because again, thinking about us as adults, most of us aren't capable of naming exactly what we're feeling because we've been rushing through life feeling like we don't have the right to slow down to feel. And so could we give that to our kids, of just sitting next to them and just being like, that felt hard. Mm-hmm. And just letting that be for a minute and being okay. And I think the other thing I've really had to learn, and I think this is more my shame brain, particularly as sort of a high functioning people pleaser, make sure nobody's ever inconvenienced. And then also sort of the therapy role is also not expecting our kids to always operate at this level that's never inconvenient. Like, I think Everly's still going to have meltdowns. Every kid will at 5, at 10, at 15. And I think we also, our tolerance for that goes down as our kids get older, because the structure is there to be like, well, we just got to go. We've got this, you've got school, you've got this, we've got to move on. And it's like, sometimes those are the most necessary things for her emotional development. And I've had to learn how to be inconvenienced by that and to be okay if the way she acts in front of somebody else isn't what I think is a model way of engaging. Because again, the goal isn't compliance. It's to help her understand how she's thinking, feeling, and engaging in the world. And that means getting over my own discomfort of someone judging me, and by way, not judging her because of the impact she's having on my experience. And so I think for all listeners, especially if you're like, oh my gosh, you know, my kid doesn't do this, or we couldn't have that, and you're already doing that comparison change, like your kid is exactly where they are meant to be, and we are doing amazing. And if we could love ourselves and them exactly where they're at and be in that space, that is the gift that's going to help us all thrive, not constantly comparing ourselves and thinking they should be, or we should be better or further, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. Oh, you are one of my favorite people.
It goes both ways. So I was so excited when I'm like, yay, we get to do this again today.
Yeah. And, you know, just for all of you out there, if you are someone who knows that that's your goal, but that you need someone along the journey with you, that's why there's people like us out there, right? We'll wrap this up with the idea that there is no shame in asking for help. Exactly what we talked about in our last episode together. There's no shame in saying, I need a therapy session a couple times a month to make sure that I'm staying on track. There's no shame in saying, I don't actually have to have it all figured out as a parent. That wasn't born into me when my child was born into the world. I'm going to go get myself a parenting coach. Like, do what you need to do so that you can end most of your days feeling like, I pretty much won that day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing I've done, because my shame brain was constantly ending the day with, And particularly in this last year, like I was analyzing everything and I would end most days going, you're a terrible mom. And here's this list of reasons why. And it was this pressured feeling of not handling a certain interaction well, or if I was reactive, or if I didn't have the emotional capacity to take something on, or because she was having a big feeling and all of it ended up being judgment that I didn't do it right and I didn't handle it well. And so now when I think about going through my day and ending my day, I think about, did I show up with the intention to be the best version of myself I could be? And did I anchor as best I could in my values? And to me now, what I'm realizing and what I really hone in on is it's not, did I handle that interaction perfectly? Like yesterday, I felt like I was very short with Everly in something. I could just tell I was frustrated about something else. I hadn't really expressed it. And at the end of the night, when I was kind of thinking about it, my brain's like, you handled that poorly. You were so dismissive. I was able to then go, the moment I noticed it, I told Everly that I could tell that I wasn't handling that interaction well. And I was responsible for needing to figure out and work through that. And I apologized to her and I owned that to her. And I said, gosh, this is one of those examples where mommy had a hard day.
Yeah.
And mommy's got some stuff that she needs to sort through. And it doesn't make it okay that I handled this way with you. And she now can reflect back to me, like even grownups get it wrong. And like that piece, and it's that piece for all of us is like, are you loving with the best of intention and giving yourself the same grace to get it wrong? Like our kids don't need us to be perfect the same way that we need to let go of the idea that they need to be perfect. They need us to practice self-love and humility so we can model that to them in a safe and supportive way. And so, yes, asking for help sometimes is the best way to have that because your brain is primed to tell you that you're failing. You've lived your life thinking that you aren't enough, you're not doing enough. And now these little humans seem to be representations to the world that you're not enough. So you need an outside person sometimes to hold that space and say, gosh, to me, it looks like you are loving them so deeply and you are learning how to love them in the way that works best for you and for them. That's hard.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, it's
really, really hard. And I mean, you just leaned into the most important point, which is our brains are wired to look for the negative. You can't change that. No amount of meditation or positive thinking or psychology is going to change that. It is just part of your physiological structure. But here's what you can do and what I love to do. So at the end of a day, I don't have littles anymore to do it with, but I still do it for myself. I do 1 bad, 2 good, and 1 hopeful. So what is one thing that did not go well today? Let's just name it for what it is, because our brain already wants to go there. So fine, let's do it. What are 2 things that did go well today? So by doing double the negative with the positive, we're sending that message that, you know what, it's actually okay. And then what do I hope for tomorrow? And that's where we anchor into, every day is a new day. So that's your homework, everybody. I want to see those comments. I want to hear what your 1 bad, 2 good, and 1 hopeful is. And, Kyra and I are going to be over here cheerleading for you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming back on the show and sharing your wisdom and being vulnerable to talk about spaces that very often we keep behind closed doors.
Always.
I appreciate you. And I know all our listeners do too. And so all of you out there, not only do you have your homework, but you know what you need to do. Stay mindful and proactive as we transform the toddler years.